everybody. So the sixth chapter of the food handler training program is going to cover the critical aspects of time and temperature controls for potentially hazardous foods. So the critical temperatures for various foods at various points is the most critical aspect of food safety. Any pathogens that are present can be cooked out of a food item, or food left out on time can allow pathogens to grow. The same thing with time. The longer something is left out, the more likely it is for the colonies to propagate. So, temperature control is one of the most critical factors in preventing foodborne illnesses because it directly affects the growth and survival of harmful pathogens in food. So, this chapter is going to focus on the proper use of thermometers and temperature monitoring techniques that are needed for maintaining safe and healthy food supplies. We're going to explain how accurate temperature measurement during receiving, storage, cooking, cooling, and reheating is going to help maintain food within the safe temperature zones, and it's going to help prevent the growth of pathogens. So understanding the different types of thermometers, correct temperature taking procedures, critical temperature limits is going to help empower you, the food handler, to maintain safe food temperatures and protect the consumers from foodborne illness. So there are a few different types of thermometers used in food production facilities. So we have digital thermometers that provide a quick reading and are easy to use, which makes them ideal for fast-paced food environments. But we have the dial thermometers as well, which are better suited for the thick foods, though they do take a little bit longer to register the temperature and need a little bit more adjustment from time to time. Thermocouple thermometers are accurate and deliver fast readings, which makes them a top choice in commercial settings, while infrared thermometers are generally used to measure the surface temperatures of foods, but don't really give an accurate reading of the internal temperature. So they're more suitable for checking if food has reached a temperature, or if a fridge is at temperature, or to get a quick external reading if you need it. To use a thermometer correctly, it should be put into the thickest part of the food item, like the thick leg of a chicken leg or the center of a chicken breast. You also want to make sure that you avoid the bone, which can be tricky because the breast and those thick parts usually have bones fairly close in. But you want to avoid the bone, the fat, or the gristle because they can distort the reading as they tend to get hot a lot faster and then they hold their temperature. In fact, you rely on this to help when your chicken is setting on the counter to let that heat dissipate in. You're counting on those bones to help kind of infuse some of the surrounding meat with some of that heat. Thermometers need to be calibrated regularly to make sure that they're giving you accurate readings. Two common methods are going to be used, which are the boiling point method, which basically is as simple as it sounds. You boil water, and once it hits boiling, it's 100 degrees Celsius, and you know that for a fact. So you can adjust the temperature nut to make sure that the dial is pointing or the number is registering 100 degrees Celsius. So the other method is the ice water method, which is the exact opposite. You put a super concentrated slurry of ice and water, which should bring the water temperature to exactly 0 degrees Celsius, and then that will allow you to calibrate your thermometer in the same way by adjusting the nut to make sure that it registers as 0, or by calibrating and resetting your thermometer to register 0. A thermometer should be cleaned and sanitized before and after every use so you can prevent cross-contamination. So as the thermometer pierces a food item to test the temperature, it's going to pass through some uncooked portion of the food. So that portion of the food will harbor live pathogens and can get transferred to the thermometer. So cleaning it should be done with hot soapy water after each use, as well as sanitizing with an alcohol wipe or your appropriate sanitizer. So this is kind of similar to the XL beef outbreak that happened a few years ago in Canada. The needle tenderizers poked through steak and picked up a lot of bacteria and carried it on to the next, and to the next, and to the next. So this is the same kind of principle with sanitizing your thermometer. A thermometer should be readable so that you can make sure that we have an accurate internal temperature measurement of the food. The accurate readings are the most important part in preventing undercooking, and undercooking is one of the leading causes of foodborne illness. So there's several versions of using dials or digital readouts, or even some types that'll print the readings out automatically as they're going. Those are great for refrigerators and for anything where you're keeping a constant temperature. But just make sure that your thermometer is readable. You can get an accurate reading off it. It's clearly visible, and you can keep track of all your temperatures. Freezers should be maintained at minus 18 degrees Celsius or lower. This helps food to stay relatively safe, and as long as it's frozen solid, you're relatively okay. Freezers don't actually kill bacteria, they only slow it down. So it's important to remember that even though something's been in the freezer for a little while, it doesn't necessarily mean the bacteria is killed off. Now, one exception will be something like sushi, where the salmon that's used or the raw fish used for sushi is usually cooked by freezing below minus 18 Celsius for an extended period, usually longer than 7 days or longer than a week. But again, that's a very specific circumstance and requires extremely cold, well below minus 18. Okay, refreezing thawed food is never really a good idea. You shouldn't really be refreezing unless the food has been cooked in between first. So you can thaw something, cook it, then refreeze it, but you should never thaw then directly refreeze. And that's because refreezing raw food that's already been thawed can result in the pathogens that have been living inside that frozen food from propagating into that newly thawed meat and then contaminating it further. So you always have to make sure that when you're thaw something out, that you're cooking it before you're putting it back in the freezer. You want to have as little time as possible for the food to travel from frozen to thawed through the temperature danger zone, then from thawed to frozen again in the temperature danger zone. The thawing can be done in a few different ways. So the safest way is to thaw food in the refrigerator from the day before, where the fridge is kept below 4 degrees Celsius. So that's slow and steady, and it slows the pace that bacteria can propagate. So you're going to limit your contamination. You're going to limit those already contaminated foods from becoming worse. You could also use cold running water. It's important for the water to be running, because if the water is just sitting there in the meat, you're going to recontaminate the meat and just allow the bacteria to sit there in that pool of water. So you want to have cold running water. You want to make sure the food is fully submerged in the water and there's no peaks or anything holding outside. That'll be at room temperature. And again, you want to make sure that it is kept running to make sure that the pathogens spill out into the waste. You can thaw food in the microwave, which is acceptable because the food's going to be cooked immediately and then put right into an oven or as part of a continual process. Another thing you can do is you can start cooking food right at frozen and cook it straight through until it's cooked. So if you're going to take a frozen food or a frozen pizza or frozen